Hello and welcome along to episode 3 of The Spin Bin, the series where we analyse and deconstruct the spin churned out by a captured Irish mainstream media. I'm joined in our glamorous studio tonight by Susanne Delaney, aka Suzie D. How's Suzie D?
I'm good, yeah. I know Suzie D makes me sound like a bad rap artist, but it is what it is.
Yeah, Suzie D in the house. Nice. Just before we get started, actually, myself and Susanne are running in the upcoming local elections, and we could really use your support if possible. We have a GoFundMe campaign set up, and there'll be a link in the description below, and we'd really appreciate any support you can give us. And also, we'd like to thank everybody sincerely for all their generous donations to this point, because we really couldn't do it without you. There's a lot of costs involved, so thank you very much. Okay, so let's get straight on to the show and let's see what's in the spin bin tonight. Well, it ain't mainstream media propaganda without the state broadcaster RTE. And on tonight's show, we're going to feature top-earning female presenter Claire Byrne. On last Friday morning's radio show, she was pushing the COVID boosters again. And this was followed by a segment on why so many county councillors are not contesting the upcoming local elections. We'll see what the spin on that is. We'll also be looking at Virgin Media's Tonight Show and how they decided to spin the protests that took place outside the home of Minister Roderick O'Gorman. So we have a few technical issues tonight, so apologies, but let's get straight into the first clip. And this is Claire Byrne. All right, take it away, Claire.
Campaign on Monday targeting people over the age of 80 and those with weak immune systems. Well, Dr. Lucy Jessup is Director of the National Immunisation Office at the HSE and is on the line. Good morning to you, Dr. Jessup.
Good morning.
So let's talk then about the COVID-19 booster, because from Monday you're going to focus on people who are over the age of 80 and then people over the age of 5, isn't it, who may be immunocompromised. Just explain to us the logic behind that.
So obviously we did offer the autumn-winter COVID-19 vaccine programme to a larger amount of people, but we know COVID hasn't really got a distinct seasonal pattern yet, and we do know that people in those groups that you've just mentioned do have a waning immunity to the vaccine. So even though they were vaccinated perhaps in October, November time, their protection will have waned over those last few months. And that's why we're offering them another chance to be protected now, because we do still have COVID in the community and we are still seeing cases and indeed hospitalisations and deaths occurring from COVID in those people. And we do know it's those older people and people who have a weak immune system that are particularly vulnerable. So that's why we're offering this programme now to that smaller group of people who may, even though they've had a vaccine in the autumn, it's important they come now and get this vaccine.
Now, there may be people who are not over the age of 80, but who are living in a residential care setting. Will they be offered a COVID booster?
Yes, so they're being offered as well, but it is the HSE staff will be going around those homes as they have done before to offer those vaccines. They don't really need to worry about that. That will be taken to them, as it has been in the past. But it's those people who are over 80 living in the community and those people with a weak immune system that we're sort of really trying to target with this information now.
But in the general population, you're not offering a COVID-19 booster to people who might feel better protected if they had it?
I think at this time, no, because we know that protection for people who are younger and who have good immune systems, that should last much longer than that 6 months. So they should be protected until we're probably going to be offering another vaccine, depending on NIAC advice in the autumn-winter programme. And
is there much COVID around at the moment?
So this year so far, we've had 6,500 cases notified, and indeed there are still cases being notified this week, and it has actually slightly increased from last week. So cases are still being notified. People are unfortunately still being hospitalised, and there are still deaths being reported as well.
OK, so if anyone wants more information on the vaccination programme, the HSE website, Lucy, is the place to go, is it?
Yeah, absolutely, yes.
Of course it is, absolutely, the HSE website. And is there much COVID around at the moment? Because, you know, if there is, I better get out to that shed at the back of RTE again, like. Remember that?
Yeah.
For 2 outings, supposedly in our garden shed. But anyway, so she says that's for the over 80s and for children who have weak immune systems. So that's who this rollout is for. And no discussion whatsoever on the safety or efficacy of the vaccine. That didn't come into it.
Never is. I'd like to know what kind of doctor Lucy Jessup is. She's probably just a professor like Luke O'Neill, not a medical doctor. Who knows? But
well, it was just like, I mean, to be honest, it sounded like a state-sponsored kind of drug-pushing sales pitch, basically. You know, it was just like, come on to the radio, come on to the national broadcaster and just sell your dodgy products there. I won't ask you any hard questions, don't worry.
Well, this Dr. Lucy Jessup says that unfortunately there's still deaths due to COVID-19, but it was reported in the media in the last week or so that there was no excess deaths during the so-called pandemic. This is the official bottom line now, is that there was no excess deaths during that time. And this is backed up. We already knew this because we wrote to the CSO in 2022 and we asked for how many deaths were notified to the CSO between 2020 and the first 3 quarters of 2021. And they wrote back and said that there had been 68 deaths recorded in 2020 related to COVID-19 and 88 deaths recorded or notified to the CSO in the first 3 quarters of 2021. So all these reports of thousands upon thousands of deaths, and this death count we had every day on the news for a very long time, which terrified the life out of elderly people. It turns out that nobody really died of COVID-19 if their own official statistics are to be believed. Yeah,
I mean, they might make the argument that, that's because there's no excess deaths because that's because of all the measures that we put in place and we did, such a great job on that. But no, because you look at Sweden, who didn't put in any of those measures, didn't have any regarding lockdowns or anything like that. And again, same story there.
But where did all these numbers and figures come from then? The likes of Paul Murphy, I heard him say there recently that there's been something like 2,000 COVID deaths in the last few months alone. So did people die or did people not die? They're saying that there were no excess deaths. There's excess deaths now that haven't been explained that aren't to do with COVID. So there was no excess deaths at the time.
Yeah, right. So there she is. She's pushing the vaccine again, the booster. Now, did she mention anything about side effects? Do we know whether there are any side effects with this vaccine? This is from the HPRA, Health Products Regulatory Authority, formerly the Irish Medicines Board. And what does this tell us? So
up until this month, they've received 21,168 reports of adverse effects, suspected adverse effects relating to the COVID-19 vaccine. Mm-hmm. And it's important to note that we know only between 1 and 10% of adverse events get reported because they've made it so cumbersome and time consuming for doctors to make these reports to the HPRA. So the real number is likely higher.
Mm-hmm. Much higher, yeah.
And in the United States, I believe the side effects reported to VAERS in relation to the COVID-19 vaccine, there's more side effects reported in relation to that vaccine than all other vaccines put together.
Combined. In the history of
vaccines in the United States.
That's crazy.
And I think crazy. Claire, now we have to be fair to Claire. She might be affected by long COVID and maybe have some memory problems. And she might have forgot to mention that Pfizer have been in trouble quite a few times recently, as recently as last month, in fact. I have a few notes here. I don't want to forget any of this because it's very important. So I'm going to read from my notes. A UK watchdog authority called the Prescription Medicines Code of Practice has raised concerns, and not for the first time, about Pfizer's use of social media to spread disinformation about their product. So basically what happened was the medical director of Pfizer, Beverly Phillips, she's the UK medical director of Pfizer, retweeted a post from a US Pfizer employee, as did other senior Pfizer employees, in which it was falsely claimed that the vaccine was 95% effective in preventing COVID-19. So this was an unlicensed product as well. The watchdog has claimed there's been, quote, misbehaviour that was even more widespread than they initially thought and extended right to the top of Pfizer. And that Pfizer made claims that did not reflect the available evidence regarding possible adverse reactions. So Pfizer were in trouble in 2022 for pretty much the same thing. Their CEO, Albert Bourla, who is good friends with Ursula von der Leyen, said pretty much the same thing about the COVID vaccine in relation to children in terms of safety and efficacy. Pfizer have said they're very sorry about this, about what they've, which is, I'm sure, great consolation to anybody who has died from taking this product as a result of these claims.
Yeah.
And even though they're sorry, they're appealing the ruling, and the ruling was that they acted illegally. But they have formed Pfizer about this kind of thing. In 1996, they trialled a meningitis drug called Trovan on Nigerian children, vulnerable, poor Nigerian children. And it was an illegal trial. And when children started to die, they continued with the trial. And 11 children in total died, and dozens more were left permanently disabled. And Pfizer were so sorry that they made the families submit DNA to prove that they were related to the children before they gave them any kind of compensation payout. And as far as I'm aware, they've only paid compensation to 4 families so far, and they gave them $175,000 each, which sounds, like a lot, and might be a lot to a poor family, but they've lost their child or their children. And 175,000 is nothing to Pfizer.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a case where they factor all this in before they launch certain drugs. They factor in, what claims, what legal claims there might be against them. And, is it worth their while doing it? And most of the time it is, with the amount of money they bring in. It's worth it. They can settle these cases and they can still make huge profits. Yeah,
they could be charged a couple of $100 million and it doesn't mean anything to them.
Yeah.
And can we just say, in regards to the radical left, the likes of the Paul Murphys in the country, they totally supported Pfizer during the rollout of the vaccine, and they pushed this unlicensed, unapproved experimental jab on behalf of these communists pushed this jab on behalf of, this capitalist corporate structure. And they, as far as I'm concerned, they condone this experimentation on black children, vulnerable black children, people who they claim to defend.
Yeah, for sure. He's a wrong one. During these COVID times, as Susanne said already, everybody was sitting at home scared out of their wits because you had state broadcaster RTE and Dr. Death, Tony Holohan, coming on every day talking about the case numbers, which was based on like a kind of the PCR test, which was being misused. And it was given a lot of false positive results. And as well as that, he's given out the number of deaths every day. But listen, this is a clip. Many of you might have seen it before, but I just want to show it because it's important to play it now. Michael McNamara, TD, where he's just saying, we'll have a listen first and we'll chat about it after.
Somebody is admitted to a hospital they're asymptomatic with a broken leg, for example, and require hospitalisation, and they're tested and they are asymptomatic but test positive. Are they included among the statistics of those in hospital with COVID?
Yes, they are. If they have tested positive, then they're...
Okay, so even though the reason they were admitted may not have been COVID, they may have been admitted with a broken leg or a heart attack or something unrelated to COVID, they are classified as being in hospital with COVID. They're included in the stats of those who are hospitalised with COVID at the moment.
They are included in the surveillance statistics, yeah.
Great, thank you. And they're the statistics that are relayed at the daily press conferences. Yeah, okay, thank you.
That's right.
So, as Michael said there, you could have had a broken leg or something like that, and you wouldn't have had any COVID symptoms or anything like that, but you would be included as one of the COVID cases. And obviously all this fear led people to obviously consider a lot more taking one of these, what we now understand are very dodgy vaccines, if we're still calling them that.
Yeah, we know as well that they were testing people, like let's say a person was in hospital for a week and they got tested 3 times during that week. That would be put down as 3 cases instead of 1.
Right. Yeah, so inflating the numbers as well that way. Sticking with COVID now, so for the likes of myself and yourself, who didn't get the COVID vaccine, how are we fixed in terms of our immunity to COVID-19? Well, this is Dr. John Campbell.
I want to bring you a study today from Israel. Some more independent-minded studies coming out of Israel than other countries that could be mentioned. And this study shows that natural immunity after SARS coronavirus 2 is way better than vaccine-induced immunity. In fact, what they were able to do in Israel, they were able to get two groups. One group that had the infection but not been vaccinated. Another group that had the vaccine but had not been infected. Of course, many people had both, had so-called hybrid immunity. But they had this group of people who had been infected but not vaccinated, and vaccinated but not infected. Therefore, they could compare the two directly. And the people that had the natural infection, they found that they were 13 times less likely to get reinfected. So natural infection working 13 times better than vaccine induced immunity, the natural infection way better. When it came to symptomatic infection, people that had the natural infection but weren't vaccinated were 27 times less likely to get symptomatic infection compared to people that had been vaccinated but had not had the natural infection. So this study in Israel is able to tease out the pure vaccine immunity, the pure natural immunity, and finding the pure natural immunity is 13 and 27 times better than the vaccine-induced immunity.
That's for us and people like us who didn't get the vaccine, 13 and 27 times better with natural immunity than immunity from these vaccines. And then obviously there's all the side effects that we spoke about already.
Well, this makes sense because anyone I know who's been jabbed multiple times, they always seem to have COVID. Yeah,
I've noticed that as well, yeah.
So they say anyway. It could just be that they're testing when other people are not testing and it's coming up positive and they're presuming they have COVID when they don't. But most people I know who've had 3, 4, 5, 6 jabs, their health doesn't seem to be the same. Their natural immunity to fight against any infection doesn't seem to be the same.
Yeah. And I mean, we kind of knew this. Well, I felt I knew it some years ago when we cornered Luke O'Neill on the street and put this following question to him. So this is what Professor Luke O'Neill, who was pushing these vaccines. I mean, the amount of times that this man said in the lead up to vaccines being released that 100% safe, they're 100% safe and effective, 100% safe and effective.
Take any one.
Take any one you can get.
Like a pick and mix.
Yeah, take any one you can get take it as quick as you can get it. So one morning he was on News Talk. He's on News Talk regularly. He's best buds with Pat Kenny. They're both from out Dublin.
Yeah, they're neighbours and friends.
Neighbours and friends. They hang out a lot. So, cornered them there. Some of you would have seen this clip already, but I just think, again, it's important just to show it now. We're seeing that they're pushing these boosters again.
I'm sure of the safety of the RNA vaccine, seeing that there has been no long-term clinical studies carried out.
Yeah, that'll be watched in the phase 4 once the vaccine's rolled out. In other words, once hundreds of thousands of people are vaccinated, you'll watch for that phase 4 safety analysis,
But in terms of long-term clinical trials, we don't know over months and years what effect this vaccine are going to have on the people.
We don't know that, that's true.
We don't know what effect these vaccines are going to have on the people in the medium to long term. And you just said it there. I mean, there you go.
Well, maybe Luke might have something he might like to say about all the excess deaths that have happened since the rollout of this vaccine. There was how many excess deaths in January 2024 alone? Was it over 500?
Right, yeah.
The excess death rate was up almost 16% in January 2024 alone. And nobody has any explanation for this or is even talking about this.
Yeah, there's no explanation whatsoever for the excess deaths. I mean, we're very concerned about the numbers of people dying on the roads at the moment.
Quite rightly, but...
Yeah, fair enough. But it doesn't make up for the huge numbers of excess deaths.
Yeah.
So... what is going on? Is it anything to do with the jibby-jabby?
It doesn't account for all those excess deaths, that's for sure.
Yeah. By the way, Luke O'Neill is still on News Talk regularly, so he's very accessible. If you have any questions for him, maybe we'll try and have a chat with him someday when he's finished.
Yeah, we might pop up to News Talk and hang around outside and say hello to Luke O'Neill for old time's sake.
He loves the limelight anyway. He'll give us some cock and bull story, no doubt.
He can't help himself. If someone points a camera in his face, he has to talk. He's a typical narcissist.
Yes, Luke, I hope you're watching. That's you. All right, let's move on here. Let's see, what have we got next? Oh yeah, we'll continue with Claire Byrne. So This was interesting. The following piece was about the upcoming local elections and the amount of councillors. We already seen with Fine Gael the amount of them that said Fine Gael TDs that said they're not going to contest the next general election. It seems to be the same with county councillors all around the country, where up to or over 100 sitting councillors have said that they're not going to contest the next local election, and that number is said to grow. So let's have a listen to this. This is, again, Claire Byrne last Friday morning on RTE Radio 1.
We'll be going to the polls to elect our local councillors. The last council elections were held in 2019, but in recent weeks and months, over 100 councillors have indicated they will not be seeking re-election. Some are retiring, of course, but others have various reasons for stepping back from local representation. And our reporter Brian O'Connell has spoken to several councillors about why they've decided not to stand again. And Brian joins me now. Good morning, Brian.
Morning, Claire.
The reasons, of course, are varied, but there are some common themes you found.
Nearly everyone I spoke to highlighted a changed environment, far greater personal scrutiny, a lot more online and in-person abuse, unfortunately, and even death threats as some of the main factors and contributory factors in retiring.
So you've been looking at a recent report into local government. What did that find?
Yes, I have it in my hand. It's commissioned by the Association of Irish Local Government, 21st Century Councillor in Irish Local Government, it's called. It's about a 90-page report published at the end of December. And essentially it looked at issues surrounding local elected members and the pressures they're under. I did speak to Dr. Aid Quinlivan, who's a lecturer in the Department of Geography and Politics in UCC, about this report and about the general issue of the number of councillors not going for election again. And this is some of what he told me yesterday.
Most councillors put in about 30 hours per week on council-related activities. So if you're a younger person, you're raising a family, you're trying to keep a full-time job, that's an enormous burden. The remuneration has improved since the Moorhead report going back to 2020. I'd like to get across maybe that it's not all about salary either. It's maybe about lack of supports. You know, you're talking about local councillors. They don't have administrative staff. They don't have secretaries. Maybe the meetings are held at family unfriendly hours. And then maybe the lack of thanks as well, and the abuse on the doorsteps and online.
So over 100 councillors, as Brian says, will not be standing again on the 7th of June. And that figure is likely to rise as we get closer to that date.
And that figure is likely to rise. So a couple of things at the start of that little news report there. Reasons for not contesting the next local elections. Greater personal scrutiny. Is that a bad thing? Online and in-person abuse.
Well, they wouldn't be getting that if they were doing their job properly.
What's the reason for this alleged online and in-person abuse?
Yeah, you've promised people you're going to do the job. You haven't done the job.
And death threats. So that's quite serious, obviously. But, I mean, really, how many people have received death threats? I mean, is that really the reason? Or is it a case that the mainstream parties know that they have not been representing the people for the last 5 years? They know the amount of emails that they've received, given out and asking questions, and they don't feel they're... and then they know that they haven't been representing the people and that they've no chance of getting back in anyway. The people don't want them. So are they just trying to save face and just jump ship before they're kicked?
Mm-hmm. I would say that's exactly what it is.
I would as well, to be honest.
What's this family unfriendly hours? I imagine council meetings take place during the day.
You would imagine so. Any meetings that I've ever been at take place in the day, during the day.
Yeah.
So I don't know what sort of excuse that is. So anyway, that's the crack with that. That's the kind of spin that they're putting on it. But it's okay anyway. It doesn't matter that these sitting councillors aren't going to run again, because they've replaced them with new candidates.
Oh, yeah.
And even Aintu are getting in on the act. Well, hey, give it up for...
Jose.
Syriac. How are you, Jose? You well? Navan man. Navan man, Jose.
Country Navan man.
Aye. Man, Jose. I think that's...
looks like a man you could trust.
I'm sure he is very trustworthy, Susanne.
I'm not implying otherwise.
I know you're not. But this is a common theme now we've seen over the last couple of weeks. A lot of foreign nationals, new Irish, running. And, I mean, let me show you another one. Here's one. We got to know. I couldn't believe when I saw this one. Guess who's running for Fianna Fáil? Remember this fella?
Benicio,
the hero Deliveroo driver from Parnell Square attack to run for Fianna Fáil. Like, this is just such a joke because it's a popularity contest a lot of the time with these big parties. You know, this fella now, they thought he got good traction. He saved the day. He's a good role. Well, he didn't. We'll come back to that in a second, like, you know, but that they might think that that's the public perception, like, you know, and therefore they're rolling him out. Like, we've seen it with Fine Gael rolling out Nina Carberry, the female jockey, horse racing jockey. We've seen it before with your one, the MEP, whatever her name is for Fine Gael over there.
The Rose of Tralee.
That gay Rose of Tralee, all right, yeah. Who
really now, I'm sorry, but if there's 2 brain cells in there, I'd be surprised. I've heard her speak.
And down in my own lovely county of Condueo, you have Alan Dillon, Mayo footballer. So it's a popularity contest, you know, it's about familiarity, someone that you know and you think you know them from sport. So, geez, they must be very trustworthy. They must be able to do a great job in there first. What have they done? Like, what have some of these people done? What has this fella done here? Like, why is he running for local elections?
What's he going to do for Irish people?
What is he going to do for Irish people? Like, is he going to represent the obviously he may do a better job than whoever he's replacing, possibly, but that isn't saying much. Like, you know, we're hopefully going to be replacing a lot of very bad councillors come the next local elections.
Why didn't he say in any of his interviews that he came along after the young French lad and the Irishman who actually disarmed this Algerian Riyad Bouchshaker who attacked these children and their carer? Why didn't he say that?
He didn't. So he came along afterwards when they had a handle on the situation, supposedly. They had the assailant on the ground. Yeah. And he battered him and he put him...
with his motorcycle helmet. Personally, I've no actual objection to that, after what this man did.
Yeah.
However, you made the good point. I will let you elaborate on that point about...
yeah. No, come on, you say it there.
So he battered him to a pulp, and I don't think there's very many people who would mind that. However, it meant that he was put into an induced coma for quite a period of time, and they weren't sure how he was going to be when he came out of that coma. So would he have been fit enough to stand trial? He could have hurt him enough to make sure that he never had to stand trial for this crime. That's
exactly what could have happened there. Yeah, for sure. And I suppose what's also very interesting. Sorry, do you want to say something?
Yeah, it's just he benefited from this tragedy to the tune of, I think it was €370,000.
Mm.
You know, they had a GoFundMe, buy Benicio a pint. You're going to get a lot of pints out of €370,000. And I'm just wondering what's going on here. Like, why would this man have any interest in running for local politics in Ireland? I don't really understand.
Mm. Oh, it's just a Fianna Fáil stroke completely, and
American style politics,
really
popularity contest.
Yeah, Fianna Fáil really trying to take advantage of the situation. What was also very interesting, that within a day or so of this new election candidate being launched, didn't we get an update on that poor little girl who's still in hospital? What's the update there?
So she's still in hospital over 5 months later, and they're saying that she is enjoying learning Irish, and yet she can't have food by mouth. She has it through presumably a tube in her stomach. So I'm not a medical person. I'm just wondering how it's possible that she's learning Irish when she can't even eat food.
Yeah, and the only other half positive thing they said, I think, was that she's able to move her arm or her arms.
Yeah,
and that's basically the height of it. So I suppose they had to put, like, if they're going to launch this guy, they have to put an update up. I know it's the family put out the update, obviously, and we don't know who's behind the family or who's.
Yeah, who's there could be someone manipulating the mother. You know, apparently she's foreign national. Maybe she's afraid if she doesn't toe the line, she'll be sent home. That her daughter won't be cared for. You know, who knows? Maybe she's not speaking freely about what happened.
Yeah, exactly. We just don't know. But anyway, that's another local candidate running. But this is what happens when it comes to elections. You know, they'll try every trick in the book to get re-elected or to get in the door, to hold on to power, like, you know. And let's just remind ourselves of what Pat Rabbitt said some years ago. I think this clip is from, like, 11 or so years ago, but it's still very relevant today if I can find it. Okay, here we go. Keep listening until the end.
Or do you actually have red line issues anymore?
We, against all of the odds, protected core social welfare rates. That was a profound commitment. And
do you accept your broken promises? Clearly understandable and understood promises.
Well, at this stage of the lifetime of the government, clearly we had to find money somewhere, and clearly some of them are a breach of the promise. But as I said in the Dáil, when the facts change, I change my mind. I don't know what you do. The fact that the European economy, we couldn't predict 2 years ago that the European economy was going to be in recession.
You could predict nothing with certainty 2 years ago.
But that is the point. You can't predict it with certainty.
But you predicted with certainty there'd be no cuts in child benefit if you were in government.
Well, the situation on child benefit, Sean, is that the debate is running for a very long time about whether the best off people in our society should be in receipt of child benefit. And there is a report under the chairmanship of Ita Mangan completed. And
but that's you didn't go into all that detail before the election. You kept it really simple. Protect child benefit, vote Labour.
Yeah, well, I mean, isn't that what you tend to do during an election?
Isn't that what you tend to do during an election? You lie.
Give false promises.
Yeah.
Which you know you're going to break.
That's it.
And that's what they'll do this time around. That's what they always do. In that regard, only listen to genuine independent candidates who are not just hopping on some bandwagon at the last minute like some of these councillors are now.
Yeah.
You know, what will Annie May Reid's, what will she run on this year? Didn't she say a few months ago, this is a councillor down your neck of the woods? Didn't she say when we asked her to speak to the people that that's not her job?
Good. She might put that on her election slogan.
Yeah, on her
talk to the people. It's not my job. Good woman, Annie May Reid. Okay, so there's just a couple of highlights from RTE. I mean, RTE are probably going to feature every week. There's so much spin. Like, we could be doing this show every single night. And I'd love to be doing this show every night. I'd love if we had a studio, and I'd love if we had a team of people, and hopefully at some point we will. In the meantime, we're just picking little bits and pieces.
And we'll have guests next week.
We will.
We have a few technical difficulties this week.
Yeah, so we'll get back and have a special guest next week. I want to go on to Virgin Media. It's their first time featuring on our show. And we have the Tonight Show. And this is in relation to the protests outside Minister Roderick O'Gorman's house recently. So let me give this a little play here.
Seen the Dublin riots. We have seen those mock gallows brought to the Dáil last year. We have seen a number of protests outside ministers' houses, and we saw this rather sinister process outside Roderick O'Gorman's house on Thursday night. And you tweeted over the weekend, the boundaries are being pushed here time and time again.
Yeah, I must say, I mean, I've been observing politics a long time now, and I would be very, very concerned about the safety of politicians. And I think that the boundaries are being pushed all the time. And I really fear that something we would all regret hugely will happen unless something is done about the situation. I think people were genuinely, absolutely disgusted at what happened, that it happened at his house, the banners, the people in masks, and really bewildered that Gardaí sat there and didn't do anything about it, and they can't understand it. The kernel of it being, if you like, the attack on Minister O'Gorman's house, the safety of politicians.
The kernel of it being the attack on Minister O'Gorman's house. Like, the language that to use is the attack. It's an attack.
The hyperbolic language.
Yeah, a couple of things there, just to repeat what you said, Alison O'Connor. We have seen the Dublin riots, we have seen the mock gallows, we've seen a number of protests outside ministers' houses, and we saw this rather sinister protest outside Minister O'Gorman's house. Very concerned about the safety of politicians. I think people were genuinely, absolutely disgusted at what happened.
Are they?
Were they? I wonder, were people, like, let us know, were you absolutely, genuinely disgusted at what you saw? I don't know if you saw the photos. There was maybe, I don't know, was there a dozen people there?
If that, I mean, you know, they say we can't choose who comes to live in our communities. I think then that Roderick O'Gorman cannot choose who decides to stand outside his house for an hour or two.
Yeah.
Who attacked his house? What attack took place?
Yeah. There's no attack that took place. They're talking about people wearing masks. Bear in mind, like during our COVID period, everyone was forced to wear a mask. We never did, obviously, and some great people didn't. But you know, that was one thing. And the guards at protests now, the guards are masked up. You can just see their eyes.
And Antifa.
And Antifa are masked up. And you have, you know, various people coming into the country from various religions, and the women are masked up. You know,
wearing post boxes
or ninja gear, whatever. But I do have, you know, it is, in case anyone doesn't know, and I'm not necessarily saying I agree with protesting outside Minister's House, but I understand it, and I know the reason, in case anyone doesn't know the reason as to why this is happening.
I agree with it, I'm just going to say.
You agree with it?
I do. At this point, I do, yes.
Okay, well, you're way more radical than me anyway, so that's fair enough. Like, but here is the reason why the protests are happening. They're all the tweets that Minister O'Gorman put out in 6 different languages, inviting the world's population to land on our little island.
And all the other things he's done as well. You know, he's supposed to be the Minister for Children. He never speaks about children. He defends TUSLA all the time. We won't even go into the list of things that TUSLA is guilty of, because we'd be here all day. And can we talk about this so-called journalist, Alison O'Connor?
We can indeed.
So firstly, just to say, Alison is an obsequious sycophant who's looking for an advisory role in the government, I would say.
There you go, Alison. What do you say to that?
And I'd say, you know, Alison probably cares about this as well, because she knows that journalists are not... And I hate saying that word journalist, because that's not what they are. She's a servant of the establishment. You know, she pushes the propaganda, and she is someone who she knows she could be targeted. You know, people could go and stand outside her house. But she is a total hypocrite. She wrote an article in 2021, and it was titled, she can't even put a sentence together. This is the title. It is enough simply not to be racist.
Really? That was printed?
Yes, that was printed. It is enough simply not to be racist. Should we offer more support to Black people, basically? So in this article, she laments the fact that Irish people are so incredibly privileged, and we should feel really guilty about this. And she went on to support the very violent Black Lives Matter protests in which people were killed. And she talks about George Nichenko. So when we went to get this article yesterday, funnily enough, there was stories about George Nichenko in the news afterwards, because the DPP has decided not to prosecute the guard involved in shooting this man. And the reason for that is because he was waving around a knife, and he lunged at Gardaí with a knife. And Alison is, notice the way in the Tonight Show she says things like Roderick O'Gorman's house was attacked, but she's careful about she's more careful about her language. In this article, she says that allegedly George Nichenko robbed the local Spar, and allegedly he lunged at Gardaí. He appeared to lunge at Gardaí with a knife. It's very clear this man lunged at Gardaí with a knife, and his family said that he had mental health issues, and it's probably fair to say he had, and they would know better than us. But what this wasn't was a race issue, and this is what it was made out to be. And Alison very much pushes this in her article. And when George Nichenko died, there was footage of serious riots that took place in Hartstown outside the Spar, where this young man robbed the staff there. And people were locked inside that Spar, and you could hear young women outside, young Black women shouting, "You white bastards." And there was video footage of gangs of young Black men approaching people in cars, in vans, threatening and screaming at them, harassing them, intimidating them. And there was a woman in her 60s who was violently attacked by this crowd. And Alison supports this. So Compare that to the fact that a few people stood outside Roderick O'Gorman's house with a few signs.
Yes.
And she's saying that they attacked his house.
Exactly. Yeah. Just to, I suppose, go into a little bit more detail as to why this might be happening at the likes of Minister O'Gorman's house, who is, nearly, not solely responsible, but he's one of the main people responsible for everything that's going on in this country regarding our mass immigration situation. 85% of people who applied for international protection at Dublin Airport in 2023 arrived without correct identity documents. So they either didn't have one, they had a fake one, or they had none. They dumped it, or they had a fake one.
Well, that's through the airport. So then we've got...
Through the airport, yes, sorry. That's through the airport.
But 80% of people we now know are coming across the border. So they're coming from the UK into Northern Ireland and down to the Republic across the border without identification.
Yes, exactly. Yes. I thought I had a screenshot just of that as well, but I cannot seem to find it. And as well as that, if you can just bear with me for a second, I want to play this clip here. Helen McEntee, she got a grilling during the week, which is great.
In relation to those, have we any idea how many are coming through the border with Northern Ireland to seek international protection here?
A significant proportion of people are coming through the border now.
Could you give us a figure, an idea?
I'd say it's higher than 80%.
80% of applications, right? That's particularly worrying. And what is the UK authorities saying to us?
Well, we engage with the UK authorities on a regular basis. We have a common travel area committee which meets on a quarterly basis, but we also have continuous engagement between our relevant departments. The PSNI work closely with the Gardaí in identifying where people are coming through Northern Ireland and applying for asylum here. But this is the challenge that we have advocated for no border on this island. I don't think anybody would say that we shouldn't have that situation, but it is absolutely a challenge.
So, 80%, basically saying 80% of the illegal international protection applicants here have come from the UK.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely crazy. Some great clips of her. She's like a lost lamb. She got an absolute battering there. She's way out of her depth.
She hasn't got a clue.
She doesn't know what she's doing, and she's obviously compromised to some degree. Why would you put Helen McEntee in that position, Minister for Justice? She's going to take the fall at some point. That's what she's there to do. Take the fall at some point.
You got to cut her a break, though. She's working very hard. In one respect, she's working very hard on her appearance. She seems more stylish every time I see her. Has very nice clothes. Mm-hmm. Possibly has had a nose job and braces. She has a very polished media image now. Mm. When you've got to work on that, you can't really be bothered with protecting our national borders. I think that's fair enough, isn't it?
She's got a lot going on.
Got a lot on her plate there, yeah.
What have we got here? Oh yeah, sorry. We'll just move on to this now. What slide am I playing there? Oh no, I had something else to play before that. Sorry, we're all over the shop here today.
We are a little bit all over the shop. While you're looking for that there, can I mention something about George Nichenko? It's not so much about George Nichenko, but about Mick Barry, TD, Solidarity TD. So the Dáil was suspended today because of comments he made in relation to George Nichenko, and we were mentioning that we might have a special mention each week for the most stupid or dangerous radical leftist on this show, and Alison was a strong contender.
She was.
But we decided that they, them, Dope of the Week award will go to Mick Barry, TD, who said...
Man, Mick, what did he say?
So he said, in relation to the DPP not prosecuting the Gardaí who shot George Nichenko, and I quote, "The state has apologised to the families of the Stardust victims, but on Tuesday, and everyone acclaimed the move and said never again, and yet just one day later the state appears to be doing it again." So he's actually comparing the Gardaí shooting a man who was waving around a knife and lunging at the Gardaí with a knife with the unlawful deaths of, I think, 48 victims of the Stardust fire. Obviously the two things are not comparable in any way. whatsoever.
What an absolute dope. And that's a perfect segue into this fella.
It's the way the discussion goes, and it ends up that, like, oh, the reason that the far right are able to terrorise people is because the guards are too fearful of too much oversight. Like, that's not the problem here, in my opinion. It really misses the picture. It is not just that you have not had particularly zealous policing of far-right protests. In actual fact, the Gardaí have facilitated far-right protests. They facilitated far-right people going into a library and saw it while they prevented counter-protesters. And I think the basic point is that there is, like, the issue here is we have a far-right current in society that is aiming to disrupt our democratic process, and we need ordinary people to take a stand. And people will have to do that for themselves, like force a trade union in Cork, organise a protest to protect the interests of librarians who are being harassed constantly because the guards wouldn't do it.
So he's worried about the democratic process being affected by the far right. Always the far right.
Well, that's hilarious. I mean, a democratic process is, the people have the power. Yeah. And the majority of the people have expressed time and again in this country through polls, through mainstream media polls, that they're not happy with what's going on in any way, shape or form. So
absolutely, yeah. And talking about giving out about protests there, was he not facilitated, how long did he keep that poor woman in her car for with his mob around the car?
Yeah.
Joan Burton or whatever that time,
Like they could have picked somebody better to be talking about what should and shouldn't go on at a protest.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he talks about then, what did he say?
He's obsessed as well with these books being in the library. Have you noticed that? He's obsessed with children learning about graphic sexual acts and fetishes.
Mm-hmm.
This man seems to be obsessed with that because all he ever mentioned, he gets it in at every opportunity. The library.
Yeah. So these were protesters, and I'll tell you, any footage I've seen, they're all done quite peacefully. They go in there and they try and talk to somebody in charge, and they try and mention certain books and the content that's in them, and that they want them removed. They're not suitable. They're in the young adult section, which is like what, from 12 years
12 to 17.
Young, I mean, they shouldn't be looking at a lot of this content, and they're done in a quite peaceful way. That's what I've seen from these protests. But just there, he mentions, what did he say about in the lead up to? Let me just play the end of this clip again.
Basic point is that there is, the issue here is we have a far-right current in society that is aiming to disrupt our democratic process, and we need ordinary people to take a stand. And people will have to do that for themselves, like force a trade union.
We need ordinary people to take a stand, like force a trade union. This is like trade union for civil servants. Who, by the way, when we had when we put a motion to the people of Castlebar and Mayo sometime last year, we had about 200 people in attendance at the Market Square, and we put a motion to the people, which was unanimously passed by all but one person, I think, saying that we can't take any more people into the country at the moment, into the county at the moment, because we just don't have the services and resources to look after anyone else, and we can't take anyone else in until there's been some report done, until we know what services and resources we need. So that was it. There's nothing racist or nothing like that. I mean, it doesn't matter what the colour anybody is. We just can't handle any more people, which is the same across the country. But anyway, didn't we have a huge crowd going up to Mayo County Council the week after, or the next meeting? Just after that was put to the people at Market Square, and Forza were out. Some of the people who work in Mayo County Council were out in the rain with a brand new banner. They had got it printed up, so they paid money to get a lovely banner printed up, and public money. And a few of them who were meant to be in work were outside protesting us, normal, decent, local people who are just have genuine concerns, and they're up there with their big banner saying "Everybody welcome, no to racism." But obviously, of course, nobody's in favour. Nobody's racist here. That's not the issue. And everybody is welcome. Yeah, okay, you might say that. Great idea, possibly not. But we just can't do it. That's the reality. We can't look after people. So, yeah, I just think that's hilarious. Some ordinary, decent people. And then it says workers of force a trade union.
When Paul says that the far right are disrupting democratic processes, what he actually means to say is that regular people are disrupting the Marxist activities of Paul and his crew and all of these other trade unionists and whatnot.
Yeah, that sounds about right to me. Now, last little bit here I wanted to put up, Susanne, is, this article here on RTE. Man pleads guilty to intimidating Healy-Rae outside Leinster House. We were actually at that protest that day.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't directly where this kind of incident occurred, but we wanted to compare this here. And, you've read the article, yeah?
Yeah, so this
Tell us a bit more about
22-year-old young man has pleaded guilty to intimidating Michael Healy-Rae. So what he did was he threw a plastic bottle at him. Now, I don't think that the plastic bottle was full, because I think that RTE would have had a great time emphasising that if that had been the case.
Or if it was a glass bottle even.
Exactly. And we already know they exaggerated stories from that day, because Healy-Rae's assistant dropped her phone, and it was widely reported that her phone was stolen. But there was video footage of the phone being dropped. So this young man anyway has pleaded guilty, and he could face up to 5 years in prison for this. And we just wanted to compare this to, do we have the footage of Musa?
Yeah.
So we've talked about Musa Dogan before, who's changed his name to Sammy, and has been facilitated in doing that with the state broadcaster and Virgin Media, who have both interviewed him on TV. And he, we'll show what he did, and then we'll talk about why we are comparing that with this bottle throwing incident.
Take that from us! This is my right! This is our country! It's not your last human rights! This is our country! Hey!
Where's Graham? Yeah, we went to hit the column. Where's Graham?
Yeah, you can see from that. There was a crowd of Irish lads around, and they may have been chanting or whatever, but there was no sign of violence. The first sign of violence came from this man who grabbed a railing. I'll just play that little bit again. You'll see him here in the green, right? He goes and grabs the railing to your right of the screen there now. There he goes, swinging this metal railing at people, women and children, and then it's a bit of a kick in the hole, nothing major.
This footage to me is really quite shocking. I have never seen any kind of behaviour like this from anybody who has been labelled far right at a protest. I've never ever seen this, and there seemed to be no real provocation or justifiable provocation. Not that you could justify this in any way, but nobody attacked him. Nobody, there was no shouting really or screaming. You hear somebody saying this is our country in a very impassioned way, but not in a threatening or intimidating way. And he grabs this massive railing off the railings and starts swinging it around. There's children and women present. He doesn't have any regard for anyone's safety. He appears to want to hit people. And it's Pearse Street Garda Station who charged the young man with throwing the bottle, and it would have been Pearse Street Garda Station that would have dealt with this. Mm-hmm. And there's been no charges in relation to this incident whatsoever. The media did not talk about it. In fact, he has basically been given a promotion by NGOs and mainstream news channels. He's been interviewed on TV, remember, with the sad music in the background. And
that was on the Virgin Media documentary from a week or two ago called Is Ireland Full?
Yeah, and he's very calm on camera, and he comes across very well, and he's a victim. And we just remind people who he is, that he is a wanted terrorist in Turkey. He's also been accused by the Turkish authorities of robbing a bank, of trapping a taxi driver in the boot of his car. There's a number of other charges levelled against him, and he was in Sweden, and Sweden wouldn't extradite him because they said it was a political case and they don't get involved in that. So now he's in Ireland, and I imagine he's in Ireland because he knows there's no way they're going to extradite him either. They're giving him a pat on the back for the charges levelled against him, and now he's come into our country and he's done this. If he had to hit somebody with that metal railing, I dread to think what kind of damage he would have done. So he's faced no consequence for this. Yet this young man, 22 years of age, who threw a plastic bottle, presumably empty, could face 5 years in prison.
And you can be damn sure, there'll be a lot of column inches given to this young Irishman as well. This part of the far right, no doubt. Anyone who does anything bad that you shouldn't.
He's going to be made an example of.
Yeah.
In order to prove this point, which is not true at all, that these protests, these so-called far-right protests, are violent. And there really hasn't been, I mean, that is, if that's the worst thing they can find, that somebody threw an empty plastic bottle. You know, we've had other incidents where a car has been driven through a so-called far-right protest, hitting a person. That wasn't reported on by the media either.
Yeah. I was just going to say that, like, you know, all this level at the supposed far right, like, you know, we're called far right.
Yeah.
But it's actually these radical leftists that are the dangerous, violent ones.
They are, and they did. Just to say, they did report on that car driving through the crowd, and not on the TV, but they did report it online. But they, manipulated it to sound like this guy was kind of innocent and provoked by the far right, and almost like the person who got run over deserved it.
Because just to mind now, you can remember that thing. I think it was Bedford. Is that your man's name?
Yeah,
Stephen Bedford. You had you have another fella. What's his name? That I've had a run in with before. Who was hanging around with this Sammy, whatever his name's character.
Yeah, his name escapes me. It might come back to us.
Yeah,
in a minute. We did a video about him where he bragged to me about throwing your phone into a crowd. Again, an act which could have really hurt somebody because he didn't look. He just threw it over his shoulder without looking. And
the reason he gave for that, like, can you remember?
Oh, I asked, because I was recording him. He didn't know. He was trying to kind of chat me up or whatever, and he didn't know who I was. And I was recording it, and I said, well, I was kind of laughing and playing along, and I said, well, why did you throw his phone?
Yeah, what did he do?
What did he do? And he said, oh, I don't know. He just wanted like a conversation or something.
These people, they can't deal with some simple basic questions. They cannot engage. So you have him throwing phones. I have another issue with a fella who threw a phone. Sam Belton, another high-ranking member of the Socialist Party. There'll be a lot more coming on that in the next few weeks, possibly.
And Catherine, the name now escapes me. This is something I wasn't planning on talking about, so I'll have to look up his name again. But Catherine Martin's parliamentary assistant was recorded by the Burkean saying that he loves a good milkshake to the face in reference to the act of Antifa assaulting people by throwing liquids into the faces of their targets, which could be laced with, something harmful.
Yeah.
So like curry powder in the eyes, for example.
Yes.
And he was recorded saying this and said that he absolutely condoned Antifa's violent methods. He would hand over the names and details of people who he thought to be far right. And as a consequence of that, now this is the guy who ran in the general election in the Monaghan, I think is it Carrickmacross Cross? Is that the name of the area? So he ran as a TD candidate. He was unsuccessful, but following that recording, he was given a job, a €50,000 a year job by Catherine Martin, who is the deputy leader of the Green Party, as her parliamentary assistant. And she has called out the violence of the far right and the protests and how dangerous they are. And yet she gave a job to this guy, which would seem like a reward actually for what he said.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And one of those, just that you brought up, the milkshakers there, Leah Doherty. Give Leah Doherty a shout out. She was one who was convicted actually of throwing a milkshake with something in it. Maybe it was curry powder, I don't know.
Yeah.
Had a man there a couple of years ago, and she would be the partner of Eamon Crudden, who is a lecturer in Dundalk IT, two dangerous radical leftists.
Did you remember? Did you mention her father and the phone tapping scandal?
Oh yeah, please do.
Her father was a
he was a minister.
A minister,
yeah,
and he was embroiled in a phone tapping scandal where he was recording journalists. I'd love to get this guy's name for people who I was talking about, Catherine Martin's assistant, and the reason being is because he's running for local elections in June. So this guy's young man, as I say, from the Monaghan, Castle Blaney, Carrickmacross, I think it is, area.
Right.
Would that be right, Carrickmacross? So look him up. I will find. We'll put his name in the comments.
Yeah, do have a look at that. But yeah, we're just trying to make the point here that it's a lot of these radical leftists that are associated with Antifa, the supposed anti-fascists, who are also very connected as well with political parties like People Before Profit and the Socialist Party. So some very dangerous individuals involved with these groups and these parties.
Yeah, absolutely. And Musa Dogan, actually, one of the charges levelled against him was that he tried to overthrow the government with a Marxist-Leninist approach, let's say.
He's in good company, so who's David Farrell. David O'Farrell is that's the fella. Yeah. That's the fella. The other fella who threw my phone.
And then there was Sam Belton.
Sam Belton, yeah, I mentioned Sam. There might be a lot of information or a lot more coming on Sam Belton in the next couple of weeks, depending on how certain interactions go with his solicitor. But that's really it. We're going to try and keep it to the hour, close enough. Just to remind people again that we are running in the local elections, myself in County Mayo and in the Castlebar electoral area, and Susanne in
it's
Dublin.
Looking more and more like Tala, quite possibly.
Yeah, you've got some great feedback from Tala, and you're connected to a few places in Dublin. You've lived there all your life in different places, but you have, I think, a special connection with Tala. But we'll go into that another day. But just to let people know, we have a GoFundMe campaign. There's a link in the description, and we'd really appreciate any support. And we're very grateful and thankful because there are costs involved, obviously, with printing flyers and getting a website done and bits and pieces like that. So thank you very much so far for all the donations, and
thank you. Yeah.
We'll talk to everybody next week with more spin.
Yeah, we'll have our technical difficulties sorted out by then, and we'll have some extra guests.
Hopefully. If you have any suggestions as to who to bring on as a special guest, let us know in the comments as well. All right, bye-bye. Take care.